spread-eagled in the hedge like a monstrous albino bat. The wind has blown it off the washing line and tossed it onto the wispy fingertips of the Leylandii. Despite her best efforts, she can't reach it. Her washing basket is full of dry laundry. She's removed the pegs from the line and placed them in their little bag. But she can't go back indoors until she has retrieved the fugitive bra. People might see it. Some people place washing on their lines in an untidy jumble without even pairing the socks. But Carol hangs things out in an orderly manner, beginning at the far end of the washing line with undergarments and tights. These are followed by blouses, skirts and cardigans, and finally larger items, such as sheets. Sheets are her favourite. Summer sheets are best. Their dusty warmth reminds Carol of sandy beaches and seaside trips with her sons. She looks around the garden for something to help her reach and dislodge the bra. The tools are locked in the shed, and she doesn't want to go back into the house while her bra is exposing itself to the neighbours. Unexpected events upset her. Every day she does a wash. There's always plenty to fill the machine because almost everything in her house is covered in washable fabric. The toilet roll is masked by a knitted pig. The toilet lid is embraced by a cross-stitched cover. And even her occasional bottle of wine must get dressed in a seasonal sweater before standing on the table, while Carol's arms and legs are consistently wrapped in cardigans and flesh-coloured tights. Today's wash is white. It has dried quickly in the wafting breeze, a fact that would usually make her happy. Next door, Sophie and Louisa lie on parallel beds, Swiss-rolled by duvets and yawning like lions. They've slept through breakfast and lunch and landed somewhere in the middle of the afternoon. Louisa unravels herself and kicks her duvet away. She knuckles her eyes and remembers the whispered conversation that kept them awake so long. Her friendship with Sophie is new and needs the reinforcement of disclosure. Last night they exchanged confidences like gifts, feeding each other small nibbles of truth. I used to fancy Matt Jones, and I used to suck my thumb. Louisa hasn't told Sophie about what happened with Matt Jones yet. She hasn't said anything about following him into the garden at a party, about the way his tongue slugged in and out of her mouth, the way his spit dribbled down her chin. She hasn't mentioned his busy hands that reminded her of the time she'd been body searched at the airport. Eventually, he uncoupled himself with a great slurp. "What's up with you, then?" he said. "You frigid or something?" Louisa kneels up and crawls to the end of the bed, where she can lift a small corner of curtain to eye the weather. "Oh, come and look at this, Sophie," she giggles. Sophie is lost in the swirl of a chasmal yawn. She waves a hang-on-a-minute hand at Louisa. "Come on, quick, you're going to miss it." Sophie gets out of bed and shuffles to the window. "Look," Louisa points. "It's Mrs. Evans from next door. Her bra's blown away. It's stuck in the hedge." Sophie crouches next to her friend so as not to be seen. They stare at Mrs. Evans for a moment, watch her reach up and fall short. "Look at the size of it. It's enormous," Sophie giggles. "She's got massive bazongas, that's why." "Bazongas?" Sophie laughs. "Bazookas, hooters, knockers," Louisa sniggers. "Tits, baps, breasts." She can feel herself beginning to unravel. A coil of Matt Jones-related worry starts to spin out of her chest like cotton from a bobbin. "Airbags, torpedoes, jugs, boobs, melons, speed bumps." "Stop it," Sophie gasps. I'm going to wet myself." Mrs. Evans reaches up again, and both girls are mesmerised by the scalloped sway of her upper arm flesh. Louisa glances at her own tightly wrapped arms. "I am never going to have arms like that," she announces confidently. "I bet it's the first time her underwear's ever been in a hedge," Sophie says, and they burst into a fresh whirl of laughter. A long time ago, before bras were allied to absence and excavation, Carol might have been amused by runaway underwear. Back then, she used to read romantic fiction. It was a habit that began when the boys were small, and there seemed to be more ever after than happily about her life. She would buy the second-hand romances for a few pence each. Then she would lose herself in an exciting world of millionaire businessmen and exotic holidays. She was more bored than unhappy. There was only so much housework she could do, and as the boys got older, they required less and less mothering. She filled the gaps with romance. Boris was a good husband. He was kind, straightforward, and a hard worker. But he referred to making love as, "How's your father?" or "slap and tickle," and he would say, "Wah-hey!" and "Fwaw!" if he happened upon her in her underwear, even after the boys had left home. He commentated on their sexual relations like a football pundit until she told him not to. His Yorkshire accent stopped her from pretending that he was a sheikh or an Italian count, and he had to be content instead with a post-match report, sitting up in bed afterwards like Des Lynam, reviewing his selected highlights. Sometimes she enjoyed going to bed with him, but she always felt shy about it afterwards. The next day, she would watch him glugging soup at the dinner table and remember his enthusiastic harumphing, and it all seemed rather ridiculous. Once he said, "Kiss me like you've never kissed me before. Go on, say it to me." "Oh, all right," she replied. "Kiss me like you've never kissed me before." She closed her eyes and waited for his kiss. A tiny part of her imagined the possibility of being swept into his embrace, stretched over his arm, and kissed with a passionate but tender fury. But he clamped his mouth around her nose and wormed the tip of his tongue into her left nostril. She pushed him hard in the chest, and he stepped back, laughing. "Bet you've never been kissed like that before," he said. Occasionally, he did something romantic. Once he copied, "Shall I compare thee to a summer's day?" into a greetings card and wrote, "That's you, that is," underneath. A week before she had her left breast removed, he wrote her a letter. She keeps it in the drawer of her bedside cupboard. "Dear Carol, on the radio this morning, they said that no one writes love letters anymore, so I thought I'd have a go. Even with one headlight out, you'll still be smashing. You keep everything so clean. Your Yorkshire puddings are the best I've ever tasted. And when I come home and you've been baking, the house is warm, you are in the kitchen and your face is a bit pink, it makes me want to kiss you. Love, Boris." After the surgery, she stopped reading romantic fiction, and she stopped taking her bra off in front of Boris. The usual "how's your father" forays occurred, but she always kept herself covered. Perhaps it was around that time that she started covering up other things too. She got used to the scar and the rucked-up pucker of her freshly soldered skin. It was the other breast that bothered her, dangling jollily as if it didn't know yet. It left her feeling unbalanced, and, although she tried not to, she wondered if there were lethal secrets concealed in its ducts and lobules. Boris retired a year after her operation. Not long later, he booked a surprise off-peak break in Cornwall. On the last evening, they went out to dinner. Carol wore a pretty halter-neck dress with a mohair cardigan to ward off the chill of autumn. Afterwards, they drove to the coastal path at Gunwallow. It was a dark night. Look, love." Boris cleared his throat. "I've been thinking. I'm not very good at this sort of thing, so I thought I'd borrow someone else's words. Let me not to the marriage of true minds," he began. As he delivered the poem, Carol tight-roped between laughter and a spiky emotion that poked her throat. Once she got over the urge to laugh, she recognised that his recitation was the most romantic thing she'd ever heard. She felt as if she was in a scene from one of the novels she used to read, even though they never featured plump, middle-aged, single-breasted women. When he finished, She didn't say anything. They stood together in the darkness, and then he kissed her. As she kissed him back, he slid the cardigan down her arms. She was a little surprised when he slipped a finger into the side of her dress and under the edge of her bra. She stood very still as he explored the knotty verge of scar tissue. "There you are," he said. "Love is not love, which alters when it alteration finds." Standing in the garden, Carol wishes Boris could see her bra, stranded in the hedge. It would make him laugh. She cases the area once more, in search of a solution, and notices the washing line prop. The girls watch Mrs. Evans fishing for her bra. "She'll never do it," Sophie says. "Is there someone who can help? Does she live by herself?" "Her husband's dead," Louisa shrugs. "He died ages ago. It was like 7 years ago at least." "Was he fat too?" Sophie asks. "Not really, but he had a big fat moustache, like a hairy caterpillar." "Oh, gross. Imagine being kissed by someone with a moustache." Louisa thinks about being kissed by Matt Jones. The thought is definitely grosser than Mr. Evans's furry moustache. "I can't imagine her kissing anyone, can you?" says Sophie. Louisa considers Mrs. Evans for a moment. "Not really." "Maybe she had a sexless marriage," Sophie laughs. "Perhaps she's never done it." "Well, she must have. She's got 2 sons." "Oh, can you imagine?" Sophie uncrouches and strikes a pose in front of the window. "Oh, Mr. Evans, don't rumple my apron. I'm trying to wash the tablecloths. Stop it, you'll add in my pop socks." "Get down, she'll see you," Louisa hisses. "No, Mr. Evans, you may not remove my slippers. I'm frigid. Mr. Evans, you're creasing my pleats." Louisa is suddenly unsure about Sophie. I bet she wasn't frigid when she was younger. People just say stuff like that for the sake of it. "Oh, get you, sticking up for that. Stop it." Louisa's words unfasten their tentative friendship, leaving it in 2 pieces, like a split end. Sophie moves away from the window. "I'm going to the loo," she huffs. But Louisa stays on the end of the bed, peeping out through the gap in the curtains. She watches Mrs. Evans retrieve the bra and quickly bury it in the waiting washing basket. Then she crawls back into bed and snuggles into a spool of duvet. She closes her eyes and imagines kissing a boy warmly, expertly. The imaginary boy brushes her jaw gently with the tips of his fingers, just like sexy men do in films. And Louisa smiles as she hides under the covers.
Emma Fielding was reading Undercovers from Sweet Home, a collection of short stories by Caris Bray. It was abridged by John Peacock and was a peer production for BBC Radio 4 Extra. The producer was David Blunt.
Drama on BBC Radio 4 Extra.
Gossip never made a man cough up black blood or become a corpse in his bed overnight. We can't bury them fast enough. Some men are digging their own graves.
Great stories.
This is nanotechnology. Machines the size of molecules.
I know we just met a little green man, but that really does sound like science fiction.
Great actors.
You may be a sceptic, but I am still a believer. And, mockery of a priest though he is, I have no wish to be damned for my sins.
Drama every day on BBC Radio 4